Welcome to the Art of Marblizing. Here's our subject vehicle. As you can see, the gray pieces in the front are made of a flexible plastic and are primed with a different style of primer designed primarily for that substrate. We used the KP2 zinc chromate epoxy primer on the entire vehicle. Of course, we stripped off all the existing paint that was on the car, and we did the proper body work that was needed to bring the car to a #1 condition. Everything now has been sanded with the 400 grit wet, and we're ready to do our final wipe down and begin our seal coats very soon. The subject vehicle is a 1981 Buick Regal with actually a very low mileage car, 30,000 actual miles. And so we figured it was an excellent subject for our two-tone marbleizing and candy finish. You're going to see this process taken from the beginning right through the final buffing procedures as we walk through this job. Now again, you'll notice the gray at the rear. This again is a plastic piece that we primered with a special plastic. We do not recommend the EP2 or the KP2 on the very flexible plastics. Here Denny is doing the final wipe down. Make sure that the chemicals that you're using are designed for final wash. They generally say we do not recommend the use of tar, wax, and grease removers at this stage. You notice he's doing small areas so that it stays wet while he's doing his wipe down. Now we followed with a tack cloth, and we've tacked everything first with an air gun, making sure to tack all the paper and everything, because every piece of that vehicle can contain some dirt. Now we're applying the seal coat. We're using the Co-Seal, which is a universal acrylic sealer, and it is an excellent sealer. It's got varieties which prevents penetration, although with a two-part primer this is really not a danger. The main reason we're doing this is we want the dark gray look because our base coat is going to be black for the Marblizer. We're using a 50% pattern overlap. We're getting the entire vehicle well covered. As you can see, we're getting full coverage in one coat. The nice thing about the Co-Seal is we don't thin it. We allow you to. 1 quart of Co-Seal will make 2.5 quarts of sprayable sealer. It's an excellent bargain, and we get many favorable comments on this product. This is one of our methods of using and doing the door jambs at the same time we paint the car. We are going to marbleize everything. We're going to do the door jambs, the mirrors, everything involved. Now notice how we draw the invisible straight lines as we're applying the sealer, and not let the vehicle's edges or any of the sculpturing of the metal try to trick us. We use the invisible graphing in our eyes, and we put on the 50% pattern overlap as we move across the hood. When we get to the other side of the hood, we'll lift it again so that we can get inside and do these edging areas. This is critical stuff, and it's so much easier to do it now rather than to do the mask off later, which becomes real troublesome. If this were a super show vehicle, of course, we may have a different attitude. We're doing a street-driven car here, and it may see a show or two for fun. But now notice how the application is the 50%. See the groove on the hood, how we pay no attention to this groove? We don't let ourselves get tricked up into following that sculpturing. We cross over it when the time is right. All right, now our next move is to mix and apply the PBC 100, which is our black sparkle pearl base coat for the Marblizer. This is a reduced 50%, so to 2 quarts, we add 1 quart of reducer. So let's open the 2 quarts. Make sure that they're well stirred. We had them on the shaker prior to this to make sure that they were well mixed. But one way to be sure you're getting everything that you paid for is to pour the quart cans into a mixing vial and then add your reducer to the empty cans and stir the reducer in there to make sure you're getting every drop of the products that you paid for. So we'll add reducer to the can. It's 2 quarts to 1 quart of reducer. Put it up to the appropriate level. Then go ahead and stir the reducer in the can to make sure we're getting all the pearl that might be stuck in the corners of the can off. And then transfer this reducer to the other can. so that we're again taking advantage of the reducer to clean our can out for us, which, by the way, and with today's pollution laws, it's very important that these cans do be flushed before they're put into the garbage. All right, now we add our reducer. Whoops, we're running out of can room here. Transfer this to a larger container. All right, add the rest of our reducer, stir this together. Now, it's not a bad idea to save these cans in case we have leftover material. Because it's not catalyzed, we will be able to make use of storing any leftover product. Now, we've got ourselves about 3 quarts mixed here, which should be enough to get around the vehicle a couple of times. Now, we may need that 3rd quart, and if we do, we'll come out and mix it at that time. All right, we'll get our mask on and get our tack rag, and it's a good idea to tack coat your sealer application. Make sure that the tack rag is fully open so you're not transferring any glue, or if you're using the new static-free tack rags, they're used as they come out of the bag. So that's our next move. Let's go do it. Here we are using a tack cloth to do the final lint removal. If you should see lint that's embedded in the sealer, it's comfortable to go in with a little 5 or even 600 and lightly remove that lint before we begin our painting. Here we are applying the PBC 100, which covers excellent. As we showed you, it's thinned 50%. I'm using an HVLP gravity feed gun here. At House of Kolor, we have many spray guns, and we are constantly testing new paint guns to find out which ones work the best with our products. If you have a question about a spray gun, don't hesitate to call our technical line. We can generally tell you what nozzle and needle combination are required with various spray guns. And we do appreciate the gun manufacturers who work with us with the custom painting field. This happens to be a SATA gun. It's an HVLP, it's a 92, the make of the gun. It works excellent. By the way, don't be afraid, most every gun works with our products. Gun adjustments are more critical than most people think, and we can help you along those lines, particularly if you're painting motorcycle parts or smaller parts. Here we're doing the routine of getting all of the jams covered with the base coat before we begin our walk down the sides, etc. So we keep that overspray to a minimum. During the seal coat application, it may not be as critical. But do get down there and take a look underneath the doors with a creeper. We're not showing that in this video, but it is important to get down there on the floor with a flashlight and make sure that you've got the coverage that's required, particularly in the rockers, the wheel openings, and the lower areas of the door. Particularly when paint judging is done, where do the judges look? They look for the hardest places to paint. And so if you really want to keep your quality up, you have to get involved and get down in these areas and make sure that you're getting the coverage. We'll get our 2 to 3 coats of the PBC 100 applied, and then we go into the fun part of applying the Marblizer on this car. Always make sure to make a pass across the front edges, because remember, the paint will not turn the corner. We as painters have to make sure that we're getting the coverage that we need in the areas. Try to maintain a parallel with your air cap as close as humanly possible so that you get the coats on as evenly as can be. Try not to rub against the vehicle, of course, so you need that long reach. On certain vehicles, you do need something to stand on or a ramp to get you up into these high areas. Again, I'm making the pass across the back. Make sure you get the coverage in those hard to find and hard to cover areas. After the hood is done, we'll make sure we've got everything, and then we begin our walk down the side. Now notice on this pass, as the front fender tapers, we don't go all the way up to the front fender. We stop. Now the next pass back, we will go all the way to the edge of the front fender, because using our straight line graph thinking in our mind, this is what it takes. That front fender tapers. Now we're maintaining perfection here. The idea is during all of the coating applications is to do it with some love and some care. So many painters I've talked to, they put on the primer like it means nothing. If the primer is applied properly, you have less sanding work to do. It's not that it's going to be sanded, but why not strain it and treat it like a coating that it is and put it on as good as we know how. Now remember, when half the spray goes into the wheelhouse, that's our signal to complete the back of the quarter panel, the wheelhouse, and then do the center of the two wheel openings. And again, remember to get down low, double check yourself to make sure that you're getting the coverage. We hear from painters all the time that get the cars outside the booth and find out that they have not gotten proper coverage in certain areas. Not that it can't be touched up, but who needs the headache or the heartache if it just takes a few more minutes? Now, and look at the hose around my feet. One of the biggest management problems you have when you walk the length of a car is making sure you're not going to trip up in that hose, or if you're using a pressure pot, stand on the hose, which can cut off the air and make that pressure pot turn into a squirt gun. And this can be real problematic when you're trying to do high quality. Again, try to maintain that parallel with the air cap, and it means getting down on your knees many times, as you saw Denny do during the application of the sealer. Don't be afraid to get down there and get dirty and get the job done right. As you witnessed, we just completed applying 2 coats of the PBC 100 Black Sparkle Pearl. As you read on the label, it does call for 3 coats, but this particular color covers so well, the 3rd coat did not seem necessary. We've got full coverage. We got a creeper and brought it into the booth and laid down and checked our rocker panels and our wheelhouses and all of the lower areas to make sure that we had good coverage. Now comes the fun. We've let that base coat dry for 15 to 20 minutes to make sure it's thoroughly cured. Now we're going in with our Marblizer. Now the Marblizer is not reduced. Do not add anything to it. It will not take it. The only thing we would ever recommend adding to the Marblizer would be the mini or the ultra mini flakes, which does add a nice flash, and it's something for you to fool with and give it a go. All right, now we just simply mix, stir well to make sure that the pearl, which is an encapsulated European style of pearl, is well mixed. And then we strain into our paint gun and we get ready with the Seran Wrap, which can commonly be used, or in other cases we just use car cover material. The thin film seems to work the best because it's more staticky and it clings better and it gives better patterns, as you'll see when we begin. What we're going to do here now is we're going to apply 1 medium coat with a 50% pattern overlap, very much like we painted everything else. I'm using a siphon feed gun here in this case. Now, how much time do we have once the Marblizer has been applied? Generally speaking, it's about 1 minute. So after you've gotten your coat on, from 1 minute from the beginning coat, you want to have your assistants ready with the wrap. Now also, car cover material works excellent for this. What we're using is 18-inch pieces, which Saran Wrap is not available in. But just make sure that the millage is thin, because the plastic has a normal tendency to want to go on there uneven, because that's just the way plastic is. Notice how it lays on here. This is a 36-inch sheet that we're using. And so it's very thin film. Cut small pieces for the small areas. Then we get them all in place, and you must rub it in with a firm hand. So we just take and wipe it down every place that we've applied the Marblizer to make sure that we're getting good contact. And then you immediately remove it. I mean, you can wait longer, obviously, if you wish, but I wouldn't wait very long to get it removed. Now, we pat it down. As you'll see, they're getting the other pieces cut for the other side. This is so much fun and easy to do, and the effects are totally amazing. It looks like you worked and worked and worked. Some people call this technique bowling ball. It's been called many other things. And by the way, there are other effects that can be done with this Marblizer material. We've used sponges. You can use wrinkled up tin foil, but nothing seems to work as well as the foil, this particular wrap, the Saran Wrap or the freezer wrap, as it's sometimes called, for making the marble look effect. I mean, it's just really neat looking. It gives the finish a depth, like you'll see as we get going. Okay, now it's on, so all we do is rub it down. And it must be rubbed everywhere. So you can see my hand contact. We push it down, and we're going to do the door jambs and everything on this job. It's very simple. It takes only a matter of minutes. We'll complete the marbleizing effect on this whole car in less than 30 minutes. But the effects are amazing. Now you can take and blot certain areas if you see that the marbleizer is a little thick. Be careful. Don't use a lot of pressure on the blotting because many times it'll pick up more than you want. It's always best to come in and make a couple of hits, lighter ones, to make sure that you're getting the look. Now see how simple, once this has been pressed down, we just grab a hold of the two sheets and simply yank them off. Everything has been wiped down, and so the effect is there. Now don't plan to reuse any of this. It's junk. Once it's been used on one side, simply throw it away and begin again. Now this is our effect on the sail area. We're going to use another color marbleizer. Because we're putting a candy color over this whole job, it's extremely important that we get enough brightness. In other words, if I were to put candy color over this particular blue, this is a two-tone marbleizer, actually, the pink-blue combination, it would tend to go away a little bit, and I think we'd lose some of the depth. But by finishing out with a silver marbleizer over the top of the blue, it'll give us the effect and the lightness that we want, as you'll see when we begin applying the candies. But first, we have to let this particular marbleizer, when it's all done, it should sit for at least 30 minutes in a 70-degree shop before you begin the second marbleizer. Now, they can be reflowed, so if you get something you don't like, it can be hit again and blotted again with the wrap, and the job looks fine. And don't worry about blending in adjacent panels. As you'll see when we get into this, that's no problem at all. Now we're cutting enough extra here so it runs down over the deck lid so we keep the pattern concentric throughout the job. Now we're minimizing the overspray onto the side of the vehicle, as you can see, but a little bit of overspray on there, as I said, is not a problem. So don't be concerned about it. So we get all the wrap out there again very simply before we do any wipe down. But you don't just lie it on. You must put a hand to it and you must rub it in, as you'll see. We're rubbing it in. See the hand contact? Don't be afraid. Get it in there. Just rub it down. It's so easy to do. And because you can see how it wrinkles up, and it gives us some amazing designs. And it's so simple. Now we catch all the minor little areas back here with the wrap. We're doing the plastic parts, the flexible plastic parts as well. And now it's done. We pull it off, and our design, as you will see, it happens magically before our eyes. And it does look very marble-like. Now there are other methods you can do to make it become more marble-like by taking a feather and dipping it into some of the base coat and dragging that along as well. There's many techniques to make it look more like the real thing. But we're doing this just in the simplest of ways. And now we're doing the hood. So we start at the top, we do the trunk, then we do the hood. Now notice the size of my pattern and how fast I'm moving through the area. I'm not putting a lot on. You really don't need to. Do you know that we did this whole car with a quart of marbleizer of each of the colors? So the distance that this stuff goes is totally amazing. You will get areas that the material gets a little heavy, and remember, you can just take any of this and ball it up and get back on these areas where you see that the marbleizer is a little bit thick. Isn't that amazing how fast and easy it is, and the intricate designs that you get? And I know it looks rather rough, but 3 coats of clear and it smooths it right out. It's not at all as rough as it looks. When it dries down, the actual film applied is extremely small. Now I see some heavy areas. I'm going in and just blotting to catch some of the heavy areas of paint, and just doing a light one. Now we're going down the side. Again, same routine. We go for the walk just like we do when we're applying all of our materials. That keeps the millage even. Do you know that every time the gun stops and starts, the millage increases? And we do see that problem when painters sometimes stop at the doors and stop at the quarter panels where you see the darker edges there. And that's caused by stopping. You just can't. You must go for that long walk. All right, now we're pulling out the full lengths. going up into the sail area so that we get a good match up in there. That's a critical part. Where the colors meet. I think you're getting the gist of this. It's not hard at all. It's a lot of fun, and it's totally amazing how rich the vehicle looks when it's done in this material. Make the adjustments. Don't worry about it. I mean, if it's not exactly right, just make sure you get all the areas covered. The most important mistake that you could make is not getting it laid in one area, because then it's just going to look rather dull, because it's just a pearl laid over there without the markings that add the richness. As soon as you're sure you've rubbed on, notice how it moves around. Don't worry about that. That's part of it. You know, just a firm hand contact, get it wiped in. This is the name of how this game works. And we did the wheel wells. Notice Denny's getting inside there to make sure those wheel wells are well covered. We're doing the entire vehicle inside and out, and that's just the way it is. I think it's the way it should be. And the main reason we tackled this project is to show you how simple something like this is. Now, we do have the chemist in there. He's the developmental chemist on this product. And isn't that fun? Look at the activity going on in this paint job. Now, wait till you see it with the second color on. Because by using two marbleizers and using the pink candy, that's what we're going to put over this combination, wherever the pink candy picks up on the blue, it turns purple, and wherever the pink candy hits the silver marbleizer, it turns into a beautiful magenta shade. And so this car is going to be unbelievable when you see it completed. So now we have a weight. We've got to let this baby sit now and harden up, so that we can go to the next marbleizer. Basically, I think a painter and one man could get the job done. Put the gun down quickly. I think you noticed we waited almost no time for the marbleizer to set up. On smaller parts, motorcycles and things like that, your wait may be like 1 minute on a watch before you lay your wrap down. All right, we've done the pink-blue marbleizer. The MB04 was our first one down. Now we're going to go back over it with the MB01, the silver-white. For more impact, because we're going to finish this job off with a candy color. And so we need that extra brightness to bring the color up to the customer's choice. Okay, basically it's the same routine, only now we're applying the silver-white marbleizer over the top of the blue. The guys are ready. We'll get to the other side. They'll start putting the material on. As I said, on a large vehicle, you don't have to wait the full minute. And we're getting good detail. But of course, our shop is a good 72 degrees at this point, and that's critical. As I mentioned at the bench, sometimes the wait is 15 to 20 minutes, but I really think that sometimes 30, and if your shop is cool, it could even be longer, the wait between coats. And you'll tell by touching the film that you've sprayed on the marbleizer or whether or not it's ready for your top coats. And we're going to talk about the top coat application, because this particular material, lacquer will stick to it immediately with as little or no problems. But if we're applying a urethane candy or a urethane clear to a marbleizer, it's extremely important to apply one coat of adhesion promoter or the SG100 that we make, which is an intercoat clear. Otherwise, there is a very good chance that the clear or the candy will not properly adhere to the marbleizer. So this is a critical part of marbleizing, and we'll cover this again, because we've already had the calls of people who have had their clear come off after they've applied it over the marbleizer because they didn't read the label instructions, where it says to use an SG100. Well, when those labels were done, we didn't have the AP01 adhesion promoter. And the adhesion promoter I like because it's very fast. You put one medium coat of AP01 adhesion promoter on, and you can begin top coating in 5 minutes. If you want, you may also use the SG100. Now that works particularly well if you're going to do additional artwork to this job, like you're going to do some tape outs or whatever. The AP01 works for speed, going immediately over this, whereas the SG100 Intercoat Clear would allow you to do some artwork, additional tape outs over this job, and at the same time give you that adhesion that you need for your following top coats. Also gives you a little room to sand if you need to scuff something. Maybe you're not going to complete this job in one day like we did. We literally did this entire job in 4 hours. Once we started with the sealer and went through to the 2 marbleizing techniques and applied the candies and the first clear coats. Of course, that doesn't mean that we didn't come back and color sand, as we'll show you, and reflow the following day to get the roughness out, the little bit of roughness that does take place when you apply the marbleizer. But it's nothing like a flake job or something like that. It's extremely easy to do. Again, we're running the length because that's the way we want our design to run. Whichever way you lay the wrap is the way your design is going to run. Now, don't be afraid to get in there and rub hard. You can rub down hard. You notice they're pussyfooting a little bit sometimes the way they're rubbing down, but it just depends on your design. That's why we call this an artistic base coat, because how you do things is going to affect the final look. Now, look at how dramatic this is getting with the 2 colors. I mean, it's totally amazing. It's going to be absolutely wild when we start going to the candy colors, because this is all going to be buried over a transparent tinted candy color that's going to give us the look that we want. Now we're up on the hood, completing the hood. Again, you can be rather casual about the application of the marbleizer. It's not difficult to apply. Again, I'm just taking it, fast, as you can see. Putting it on with a 50% pattern overlap with a large pattern. Now, this stuff is not a hazardous material in so much as a normal TC23 respirator works excellent, because this is only this material is just very much like a lacquer in its behavior and spraying techniques, even though it's not. It doesn't have a catalyst in it, so there's no extreme dangers involved of spraying it. Just a normal charcoal respirator works fine, whereas the candies, the way we're going with the urethane, it's going to require excellent ventilation and the proper respirator. Normally a air supply respirator for isocyanates. There again, our design. We've got a few little areas we're going to go back and mop just to touch them a little bit where the material's a little heavy. Again, you can use the balled up material that you've removed for that. All right, our last walk for the marbleizing part of it. Again, I'm rather casual. Just get it on there. Don't want it super heavy. Watch your hose. Notice the hose almost hit the side of the car there. Those are things you've always got to have good hose control. Very important. All right, laying on our final. Rubbing it in, like we've been doing right along. Catching all the edges, the grooves, and go up over into the hood area where we've got a little bit on the hood. You cannot tell where we blended from the hood into the sides or into the sail area. Absolutely no way. There's so much pattern and design going on that it blends right in. All right, we've completed the two-tone marbleizer. As you saw in the booth, it does take a couple of extra people. I really think if a man is working quickly with one good man, you could do it with yourself by hanging your gun and getting involved. Get the widest food wrap that you can buy, or use the thin film, as we mentioned earlier, on the car maskers. Those real long, super wide ones would work excellent. Now, always do a spray out of the final finish and get customer approval. We've gone over this. We used a light base on one and a darker base on the other, and by reversing, using the white marbleizer last, radically changes the color. As you can see, the much lighter color, whereas if we use the blue marbleizer last, it's going to be darker. Now, in order to get this effect, we used the UK18, which is an acrylic urethane candy coat. We're going to richen that slightly by using a little of the candy concentrate, because it takes it off the pink shade by richening it,
and it makes it into a blue shade rubine or a red shade. And so by doing that, the idea here now is you cannot apply a urethane directly over a marbleizer because it will not stick. Now we have two methods to correct that problem. We can use either the Adhere To, the APO1, which is applied with a medium coat, and it has about a 5-minute wait before you begin your top coat. The other option is using the Seran, which is our Intercoat Clear, the SG100. You mix that with a 50% reduction and apply one medium coat, but then you have to wait. There's at least a 15 to 20-minute wait before you begin your top coats. Do not allow that long a wait if you're using the Adhere To. Make sure that your candy is mixed first, it's strained into the gun, and you're ready to go. Now we have dedicated a gun specifically for the adhesion promoter, and we're going to use that, and we're going to be ready to go. The minute we apply that adhesion promoter, we set the gun down, we're going to pick up our candy paint gun, and we're going to go to work. Now remember, the first coats of candy are applied in the very light mode. In other words, we reduce the gun's control knob down. We turn that in so that we are getting about a 4 to 5 inch pattern, 4 to 5 inches from the end of the gun. And we use a 75% pattern overlap so that we're overlapping extra to eliminate any chance of streaking. But one of the great things about this marbleizer is that an amateur can apply this candy over that base because it's so forgiving. Because the base itself is a radical coloration change. If you do make a mistake, it's certainly not going to show. So it's an excellent beginning for an amateur to start to pick up the custom painting world.
You just want a mist coat with the gun held close in order to get that adhesion technique. It almost acts like a glue because it bonds. This is going to become one paint job. Now again, as we said, with artwork you could use the SG100. The wait would be longer, and that may not be a problem for some of you. You know, maybe you're planning to do some other tape outs. Maybe you're going to flame the vehicle now. Maybe you're going to scallop it, or maybe you're going to do some graphics on the side, whatever. In those instances, you would use the SG100, not the adhesion promoter. This vehicle is going to be one complete color. Now, I'm able to get all of this on in a matter of minutes, as you can see. We walk the sides again, same technique that we've been using throughout this job. And if you're a commercial painter and you're not walking the sides of a vehicle that you paint, you need to give it a try because it is the way that it's done, the best way. Okay, here comes the most exciting part and probably the most difficult part of this entire job, and that's getting the candy coats on evenly. We use a 75% pattern overlap on the beginning coats of candy. The reason for doing this is it tends to eliminate any chances of streaking or mottling. You notice the gun distance. We're keeping the gun fairly close. We're doing our edging. I like to go down to the quarter panel on the sail area, and that's where I stop, catching all those areas at the roof line as I go by to get all that behind me. Now I'll go immediately, of course I do the edges, and I'll go immediately to the other half of the roof and do my cut in at the front. It's required. Then again, picking up at the center. Now, one of the mistakes that painters tend to make sometimes on the candy is they do too fat an overlap where one side meets the other. And you can get a dark stripe. So concentrate on that so that you don't get that pattern overlap. Try to use the straight line thinking so that everything goes on as even as possible. Now the fact that we've richened this candy a little bit is giving us a little stronger color on the first coats. Many times candies will come in a little slower. But because you've done one candy color, understand that pigments change. Some are much more difficult colors to work with than others. The candy pink happens to be a very nice color to work with. Now we're starting again at the outside of the deck lid, moving towards the center of the deck lid, and as we round the back of the vehicle, we'll complete those areas, like we say, economy of motion. Let's get all these areas done that we need to do while we're going by. finishing the back, the whole entire back of the deck lid, catching all the 45s and angles that we know need attention around the license plate area, all of these things, getting those completed, behind the license plate, stuff that needs it. Now we'll go back immediately to the other side. Look at how this design jumps out when you start hitting it with the candy colors. Many times I would go immediately to the deck lid, but I decided on this particular coat to do the hood as I was going by as well. Now I'm using a siphon feed regular paint gun here. This is an MBC with an 80 air cap. If you're in an HVLP area where it's required, there are many, many good guns to get the job done for you, and they're improving on a monthly basis. We're seeing many improvements in these HVLPs. They're starting to work really well. Look at how this color comes on. Again, we're disregarding the body lines, but we are running that tight pattern overlap. If you'll notice, each increment of overlap is approximately 2 inches with a 6-inch pattern. That gives us our 75% pattern overlap. So as you can see, it takes many passes to just get off a half a hood. But this is critical because by doing that, now you'll notice I catch the upper parts. I go back to the deck, complete the deck on the other side, and then we're ready immediately to go into our walk down the side. Catch the 45s, like I'm doing now. Now the walk. One thing you'll find with candy painting is that you will get more paint on the upper areas than you will on the sides. You notice I move in a little bit closer on the sides to try and help compensate for some of that. It's a natural thing because the overspray on the sides falls away. The overspray on the top parts of the vehicle melts in. So many times when you take a mill gauge and do your readings, you'll find that you have a little more paint on those upper areas. So I concentrate on the sides a little bit harder and move in a little closer to get all those areas. Now we complete between the wheelhouse. Keep that angle of the air cap as close as possible. Now notice I'm hitting the brake edge here right now, so it's important that I angle the gun up a little more because the panels angle down. Don't be afraid to get down there. Now we don't show that in this video, but I did get down there with, we usually keep a creeper in the front of the booth so it can be moved from side to side, so you can get down there with a powerful flashlight and check to make sure you're getting the edges properly done. All right, so now we go to the other side, go for our walk on the other side, and then you need to use the touch test. It's very important that you don't put a wet coat directly back on a wet coat, because in doing that, whether it's base coat or Marblizer or candy, you will trap solvents. And trapped solvents can cause dry back later on the job, can give you lots of problems. In fact, when you get to the catalyzed side, it can cause runs. We tell painters if you wait until the paint job is sticky and not stringing up on your finger at the wettest point, that it's almost impossible to put a run in something, because then the paint has something to bond to and it's not over wet. If you pull up on your finger and it's stringing, that signals to you that the paint is still flowing. And no smart painter puts a coat on something that's still flowing. Usually from the time it strings up until the time it doesn't string is never more than 3 to 5 minutes. Now this is again in a 70-degree spray booth. So if your temperatures are cooler, you're obviously causing a retarding effect just based on the weather or your temperature, so you're going to require more dry time. Now get down on those rockers, man. You can't spend too much time on those lower areas making sure that they're properly applied. You'll notice we wet the floor down on the two-part. Whenever you're putting a catalyst in something, it stays wet one heck of a lot longer. Look at this design. You see how it's picking up the purple look where it hits the blue Marblizer, and it looks sort of magenta colored where it's hitting the other Marblizer, the silver. Now I'm finding that I can move almost immediately into my second coat, which I'm doing. And we will put a total of 4 or 5 coats of the candy on this job in order to get the depth and the look that we want. So it's a matter of just doing the same things over and over again And that's what turns into an excellent, super nice paint job. So again, we don't need to show you painting each and every coat. This is our second coat. Now we're slowing down a little bit. You can even see we're moving in a little bit closer with the gun. We're wetting it out. We're being careful on our overlaps. The center of the hood, the center of the deck, and the center of the roof is, as I mentioned earlier, you have to be careful. We've gone ahead and completed our 5 coats of the candy pink, using a little of the candy concentrate to get the color up. As you can see, the car is beginning to look very purple, with highlights of pink coming from here and there and highlights of a blue shade purple. It's a beautiful combination over the 2 colors of Marblizer that we used. Now we're ready for our clear coats, and we need to get a couple good coats of clear on there, and so we're not going to over reduce our clear. We're going to use the UC1 up clear. It dries quickly. It's not the least bit rubbery for color sanding the next day. It's the clear we want to use for buildup in order to get it to cure out so that we can go in and now tomorrow, before we do any sanding at all, we're going to do the door jambs. We're going to complete the door jambs in the same way, only we're going to use intensifier, which is a way to get the same color that we've taken 5 coats to do here. We'll be able to match those door jambs in 2 coats, and we're going to show you how to do that tomorrow. But let's get the clear on now, and the ratio is exactly the same as the candy, 2-1-1. 2 parts of the clear to 1 part of catalyst to 1 part reducer. All right, before we color sand the car, we said yesterday that we were going to go ahead and do the door jam. So we've masked off to eliminate any excessive amount of overspray around the vehicle when we're doing our door jams. So that's the next step. We're going to go in and 2-tone marbleize the door jams. Here we go, marbleizing under the trunk. You can see we're masked off for all the edging as well. Trunks are difficult because they have a lot of convoluted edges that are hard to get the materials into. But it works, and it works fine, you'll see. We're just doing the upper deck first before we do the side rails. That's asking for too much because there's a lot of difficult placement for the Seran Wrap in this area. We've pulled a bunch of the film, so we're ready. To get it to stay, we just kind of hang it over the top of the lid. And then just start forcing it in. Rubbing it in at all the areas. Making sure we overlap. Overlaps don't show. So don't be afraid to overlap the other one, the other piece. Obviously it doesn't want to stay there. So they are difficult. The ideal way to do it, of course, would be to take the deck lid off and lay it upside down on something if you were doing a show vehicle. Notice the runs in the Marblizer from the application. Not to worry. Doesn't mean a thing. All right, we're sure everything is rubbed down. Pull it off, and it's done. Of course, we've got another color left to do before we do the candy coats. But we just do this to show you that it can be done in some of the most obscure places. And go in with your dabbing where you see excesses, where we might have had a run or whatever. You just dab that excess out, but the effect is there and it's everywhere. And we do this same technique throughout the door jambs, under the doors. We want to make sure we've got it all. We do as best we can in the forward part of the doors. We've completed our marbleizing, our 2-tone marbleizing in the door jambs. This vehicle is a street-driven vehicle, and so we want an economical way in order to get the candy color in the jambs without creating undue overspray that might travel to the outer parts of the car. We haven't color sanded the outer parts yet. So, what's our way of doing that? We use the SG100, which is the intercoat clear, and we reduce that 100% with the RU310 because our temperature in the shop is 70 degrees or below, just slightly below. And by using the intensifier in the same candy color, we use the UK18 on the outside of the car. We're going to use the KK18 to tint this clear. We're going to show you how to do it. Now, using a touch-up gun, I'm using a Binks 15 here with an SK air cap. It's got the wide pattern. I'm able to match in 2 or 3 coats of a base coat clear mixed with the tint that we did. I'm able to match the outside color. The beauty of this is all I've got to do is clear coat it with a catalyzed clear, and I've got the durability, and I've done it without worry of overspray, without the normal problems that are involved by if I use the regular catalyzed material. All right, we soak a clean rag, and we've got our sandpaper. The number one thing that you must remember when you're color sanding a candy job, or any vehicle for that matter, is you never sand directly on the peaks of the body. Always come up to a peak from one side or the other side, and then we check ourselves with a rubber squeegee. By squeegeeing the water out of the way, you can tell if you've sanded it flat. The goal here is to sand this vehicle completely flat and knock all of the shine. That means all the little dirt nibs that got in during the paint job will be knocked out of there. Alternate your sanding pattern somewhat too, from side to side and back and forth, etc. And also they make a sanding pad for wrapping the paper in, and keep the paper well lubricated. And put a little pressure on it, but also look for colored water. If you start seeing color in the water, that tells us that we have broken through the clear somewhere, and you need to worry about that. So all we want to do is kind of sand these 2 coats of clear that we've applied enough to smooth this job out to the point that we can come back in and re-clear it. And we don't want to sand through on the edges, so please be particularly careful not to sand on a peak, not to cross an opening. We come up to an opening from one side, then come up to the opening from another side. These are critical things. You could ruin everything that we've done at this stage if we're not careful.
We completed our wet sanding on the vehicle with the 500 grit paper. We've gone over it with plain water and wiped it down. We've aired it and carefully made sure that we got all the water out of all the cracks. We wiped out the door jambs under the hood. We've closed everything up. Now we've aired and tacked everything. We're going to go back in again with the final tack before we begin our clear coats. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the products that we're using for our final clear. We're going to use the UFC1, which is a polyurethane clear. It's got a higher gloss. It's very easy to buff. It buffs just like butter. It uses a totally different catalyst than the other products we've used. We use the KU500 catalyst. The mixing ratio is the same, 2-1-1. So it's 2 parts of the clear, 1 part of the catalyst, and 1 part of the reducer. Again, our shop conditions are about 70 degrees, so we'll be using the RU310 fast dry reducer. Good idea on the flow coats to add extra reducer per mixed quart. Generally in the 3 to 6 ounce range, improves the flow and really does give you that glass-like finish. Obviously the only thing left after this, applying the 3 coats of this material, is going to be the polish. And we'll get into that when the vehicle is assembled. Let's get into our suit and go in, do our final tack, and put on this is the most fun part of the job, I think, when you've got all the hard work behind you, and now we get to do those beautiful flow coats. All right, let's go.
You can see we've color sanded the entire car. We've wiped it down carefully with water. I do not recommend the use of chemical washes at this stage. There should be no need if you've kept your fingers and hands off the vehicle. Now we carefully tack all the areas to remove any lint. It's a good idea to remask the car, which you see that we've done in some areas. Some areas are too difficult to get into remasking, but the problem is you get a lot of overspray that gets out on that paper and causes you problems on the recoat. We want the cleanest possible application of the clear here. So by carefully going over it first with an air gun, now we put on a medium wet coat. The first coat on a dry substrate should not be your wettest coat by any stretch, because the paint needs something to bond to, and so our first coat goes on what I call medium to wet. You can see that I'm wetting it, but I'm not over wetting it. You can see that the gun has been choked up, the material knob is in considerably, and this is critical, because this is where a lot of painters make mistakes on the reflows. They go in too wet and the jobs move, the paint moves, it doesn't have anything to bond to. So many times this coat is referred to as the bond coat. You notice I'm using a 50% pattern overlap, which is correct for applying the clear. Now I will move the material knob out after this first coat sets up for approximately 5 to 8 minutes. Now there is a lot more forgiving window on the UFC1 flow clear than there is on the UC1, because it stays open much longer. So even if the coat's got a little longer between, it would not be a major problem. like it is on the UC1 or the UK candies. Again, using the proper pattern overlap, we try to just wet the first coat without over-wetting. And that's a critical factor. We don't want to over-wet the first coat. But you can see the gloss that comes up immediately and how we've got our design back. Many people think once you sand that clear that you've lost everything. But the minute the new clear coats hit it, the gloss and the depth and the quality is back. This particular clear has an extremely high unrubbed gloss of 95. It's about as high as you can get. Plus it's got a nice medium-high solids, and it buffs like nothing you've seen. Even after the jobs sit for months, they still buff well. Notice we've diapered the gun cup with a tack rag to eliminate any chance of a gun drip at this stage of the gun. We do recommend it throughout the job on siphon feed guns. Using economy of motion, we're getting down here and getting the clear where we need it. Again, we walk the sides as always, the way we've done everything throughout this job. 50% pattern overlap, straight line thinking, taking our short walk. I may be taking a larger increment than 50% in some cases on the bond coat. I may do that, but I don't think I'm much over that. If you watch those gun movements between coats, they are precision. Using the overgrip to get those lower panels. Now we go outside the booth, set our timer. Don't mix more than a gallon of paint at a time. Well, we've completed our clear coats. And this job is one glossy piece. You can see that all of our design work has come back. The marbleizing effect is alive and well. The entire car has an extreme gloss to it. But we're not through yet. After the vehicle goes together, we intend to color sand the vehicle with 1200 grit paper. Again, re-smoothing it as close as possible, and then coming in with the polishing equipment. Either the 3M or the Meguiar's proper compounds and foam pads, and it will have an extremely high gloss with very little or no rippling or dirt nibs. Well, here's the vehicle in the outer shop. We've gone ahead and color sanded it completely with 1200 and went over it with the 1500 grit. So now it's ready for a final polish. We are careful not to sand right up to the edges or any areas that are difficult to get to with a polisher. We highly recommend the use of a 1500 RPM polisher because it generates heat without slinging compound. And that's what brings the shine back. But I think you'll see how fast the shine comes back when we start with our rubbing compound. Now we go over it first with a wool pad and the abrasive compound, regular fast cut compound, 1500 RPM, just taking it rather slow, let the compound do the work. Change our direction periodically with the machine so that we don't get some set pattern in our buffing. Now you'll notice as the compound starts to deplete that our shine is coming back. Only this time it's perfection. Because of the fact that we've taken all of the dirt nibs out, we've flattened all the rough spots with our color sanding process. Now you see how slow you move the machine. That's required in order to get the shine back. On a polishing of a urethane finish, a certain amount of heat must be generated. That's why we're not trying to do a large area. We're quartering off sections of a half of a hood so that we can stay in, for example, the maximum I like to see is like a 2 square foot area so that you can work the metal in order to get the heat generated so that the shine comes back. Look at that shine. It comes right back. You've got to figure about 6 or 7 or 8 hours for a color sand and polish. So that has to be included in the price if the customer wants that degree of perfection. Now we will again go over this with one more compound, a lighter duty compound with a foam pad. I really like the Meguiar's foam pads. They're excellent pads for this type of work. They do make a couple of different grit pads. They make one that cuts very well, and they make one that's for finer applications, for doing your final glazing. And so it's staging. You know, you will go over the car approximately 3 times. This is the cutting foam pad, the pink one in color. Again, we're using a different grade of compound. You know, you're managing scratch patterns is what we're doing. We're taking it from a coarse pattern, a 1500 grit pattern, down and managing these scratches down to practically nothing. And we just continue throughout the whole job. It's a good idea if you have auxiliary lighting, particularly when you're buffing the side of the car, to make sure that you're getting all the scratches out from the color sanding. And make sure you're using a good grade of sandpaper and watching to make sure that it doesn't seed up, because sandpaper can get seeds on it from fresh paint that can cause deep scratches during the color sanding. We got lucky at a swap meet and found some Unilug old Western style wheels that had been painted black by the previous owner, and we decided that these would look pretty good if we marbleized these along to match the car. So we've sanded them carefully, the existing black paint that was on them, and we're applying a black base coat, same base coat we used on the car, the PBC 100. Then we're going to follow up with the blue marbleizer, just exactly the way we did on the automobile. We got 4 of these babies. They had tires on them. It was an excellent buy, and I think they're going to look very good on the car. Allow that base to set up properly. Here we come with the blue marbleizer. Get that coat on. Now, because this is a small part, we are going to time ourselves and give ourselves 1 minute before we apply the Seran Wrap. The reason for that is we want to get a nice textured pattern. It's completely different when you're doing small parts than when you're doing a large car. Many times we don't wait at all. Now we've waited our 1 minute. We're applying it. We need to make sure we get it pressed into all the corners and the crevices that exist on this wheel in order to get our proper effect. We're going to need another piece in order to bridge, make sure we get it in, but we have to be positive that we're getting a good touch everywhere on the wheel. We'll tear off one more small piece, do the fill in, make sure we're getting it rubbed in all the areas. It's critical, because if we don't, it's going to look funny. We can come back and do some blotting if we make mistakes. Now you notice I've gone over many of these areas 2 or 3 times. Not a problem. Not a problem to make sure that it's well laid down. All right, pull it off, check the effect. Yep, it's there. Looks great. Now we'll follow up with the white marbleizer, the silver white, and then the candy, and then the clear coats. And if the wheels look good, we may not even bother color sanding them. But the next move is to get them on the vehicle. All right, we're applying the urethane candy that we've richened. Try to get our color in 3 coats to match the car. Then we're going to clear coat. And our next step is to let the wheels dry overnight, get them on the vehicle. And we're planning to put it in a car show, and we want to take you over there and show you the final product.